my part of the presentation. In your folders are a couple of resources that are in there for me. The first one is you have mini slides that you can follow along. They're slightly different than the slides that you'll see up here, just to give you sort of an edited version. So you're, of course, welcome to take notes, all of that. The second thing you have in there that I am going to reference is a packet that says Storytelling and Framing Resources, and it has our logo on the front. If you'll flip to the back of that, there's a story there with a great big photo, and we'll be talking about that in just a few minutes. So I just want to let you know, have that ready, because I am going to reference some things that are in that resources packet, so that you know what you're walking out with today. So, my name is Gail Clendenin. I'm the Communications Director with the Health and Human Services Coalition called Advocates for Ohio's Future. We are nonpartisan, we're nonprofit, and we're statewide. And what we do is we work with statewide organizations, regional health and human services organizations, and then individual advocates across the state of Ohio to get health and human services messages and policy recommendations to lawmakers in the State House. We also do a lot of work on messaging to help educate the public, help educate the media, and help people around the state, like you, tell their stories successfully so that you get done whatever it is that you're trying to get done through your organization, that you have support. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. I thought I would go ahead and take a page from Christine's book and let you know what my means, motive, and opportunity are for us and for you today. My means is that I want to give you some information on how to frame a story. Already, a lot of the questions, a lot of the ideas that have come out of our conversations today make me think about framing. What is the best way that you can tell your story so you get your audience to do what you want them to do, so that they're focused on the solution you want them focused on. And that's really what I want to give you today. The other thing we're going to talk about is a project called Ohiospeaks that Advocates for Ohio's Future runs, and that's going to be a means for people who get these grants from HealthPath to submit their stories. And so I'll be working with grant teams behind the scenes on the physical act of submitting your stories. My motive is that I want you to have a great proposal, and beyond that, I want you to have great stories that reach your audience, whether that's through this project or some other communication that you're doing. And then finally, the opportunity for you is an opportunity to use some of this information about framing in order to communicate your work really effectively with your audience through storytelling. So that's what we're going to dive into. Just a couple of things about Advocates for Ohio's Future. These are a lot of our statewide partners. We do advocacy work across the state, and really our goal is to get messages that stick into the State House and into Ohio's legislators. We actually have a few partners here in the room. Alex with Voices for Ohio's Children, they're up here, they actually serve on our board, but we rely greatly on people in organizations like yours to be partners across the state that help us, number one, know what's going on in your fields, and especially when you work with clients, because you can get a little removed from that when you're in Columbus. And then the second is that you all can help us to get messages out. So when we know that something's going down at the State House, when we have an action opportunity, excuse me, or when we have an opportunity for the people you work with to be visible in these policy questions, and they should be visible when we're talking about policy and program questions. We really want to have connections to you all. So my plug is, if you are not already connected with Advocates for Ohio's Future, please get on our list. We're not going to spam you with a million emails, but it's a way for us to get in contact with you, your organization, and the work that you do, and we really like to do that. This is us. We're all over the state, sending messages into the State House. So, some things about Ohiospeaks. Ohiospeaks is a story banking project that we started in 2012, and what it is a website that collects stories about all different kinds of health and human services and the way that Ohioans have interacted with those programs. So we like to say that we tell stories of hope and stories of struggle. We really like to be able to have examples from all different categories, and you'll see here children, older adults, people with disabilities, mental health and addiction services, food and housing assistance, Medicaid, healthcare, workforce supports and employment, and we work in all of these areas, and so we want to have resources and examples of all of those at the ready when we go to do advocacy work, or when we go to inform the public about what's going on in Ohio. So the Story Banking Project for Ohiospeaks is a website that breaks stories down by those categories I just listed, and and also by county. And what we try to do is to give a big picture of what's going on in the state of Ohio, and then to be able to break it down at the county level and at the individual level. So as a coalition, we're really responsible for the state of Ohio level picture. But Ohiospeaks really helps us to look at the county, and especially to look at the individual. So here's a little bit of how that works. When you go in, this is a screen capture from the front page of Ohiospeaks. When you go in, you can choose either to look at topic or to look at county. If we went into a topic, you're going to see stories that people have submitted about that topic. Some of them are written. Most of them have a visual. We really want to have a visual component. And then some of them are videos, like the one on the top here. You see the little gray box that says video. So there's a place to submit video content. The other way that we try to show information is that we try to pair stories and data together. So this is looking at Washington County, and when you pull up that page, you see some information on what are the trends happening in that county. What's the unemployment rate then? And this data goes through 2011, and we're actually working on an update to get even a little more recent than that. What's happening in SNAP participation in that county? It just helps us to tell that big picture story, and then below that you see at the bottom we have the example of Clyde's story, and that's not his full story. There's a full page in his whole description once you click into that space. So we use the stories to educate lawmakers. We use them to give a voice to families and to communities in Ohio who are often left out of these public debates. And then lastly, we use them to identify spokespeople or new leaders who might be really great candidates for public testimony or media interviews. And all of that, of course, is done with express permission and with coaching for those people. So that's not something that would just pop up and happen with a story. How do you submit a story? I actually want to show you how rather than telling you how, which is what this does. It's fairly simple. This is the Ohiospeaks webpage. And here's the giant button to tell your story. And it's a fairly simple form. We actually have some guides in here. Kind of circle around some ideas on how to submit stories, examples of stories. We try to help people do this as easily as possible. And then here is our form down at the bottom, which is space for a link to a video or a space for the text itself. Required information, and then saying that you understand that this could be public. And one thing to know is that stories do not automatically become public through the website. There's a quality control process through the back end. That's basically me and my colleague Will. And so when you're submitting stories as a grantee through the Ohiospeaks process, they're not going to go live immediately. We'll work together behind the scenes before they are submitted to the website. And so for us, we're thrilled to be working with HealthPath, both because we really focus on messaging, and you're going to see that in just a second, and also because it helps us to have more of these that we can share in our advocacy work. So for us, it's a really great partnership, and I hope it will be for you all too. All right, so what I want to spend most of my time talking to you about is about framing. Framing is what we do when we think about how our stories, how our messages are received by our audience. What do they already know when we're talking to them? How do we direct them towards the problems and solutions we want them to focus on, instead of them jumping to conclusions about problems and solutions they already have in their head? So let's dive in a little bit to what that means. We often think of our audience in advocacy work or in explaining our programs. We often think of our audience as not being informed. They don't necessarily know the name of my group. They don't necessarily know about the work I do with a specific program. But the reality is that no matter who I talk to, they come preloaded with all kinds of information about what they think about nonprofit work in general. What do they think about government programs? What do they think about people who need government programs or who might use them? What do they think about where the state of Ohio is at, and what should be a priority for their community? What do they think about the people down the street from them or other people in their town? What's the last news story they heard about something like this happening? So our audience comes preloaded with all of these ideas, and we don't want to fight our battles on that territory. We don't want to try to reconvince them of something when they come into a conversation with an idea. Instead, we want to frame the conversation so that we start on common ground and we can focus on the solutions I want them to consider. out what frames look like. So this is a picture of the night sky. What do you see in this picture? Definitely the Big Dipper. In fact, that comes up even before stars. We are trained, culturally programmed, to find this pattern. Now this photo actually conveniently highlights it. It puts it right in the middle. The stars are super bright, easy to see. The same is true if you're out in your backyard. But we're trained to find this. And I didn't even have to show you the lines that are here. But at some point, someone taught you how to find the Big Dipper. So if we go out and we look at the night sky, and I showed you the photo I just showed you even without the lines, you jump right to that conclusion. That's the image in your head. That's the picture. That's how you understand those points of light. Even though there are zillions of other combinations, we could draw all sorts of pictures from those stars. The problem is, what if I want you to find something else? What if I'm not about the Big Dipper? What if I'm about Ursa Major, which is a great big bear, and the Big Dipper is a part of that constellation? Or what if I'm about something right next door? What if I'm about the Little Dipper? The problem is, if you are already pre-programmed to find the Big Dipper as a constellation, I'm really going to have a tough time showing that to you and expecting you to think of anything else. It's hard to go over the top of that. So instead, what I want to do with framing is I want to figure out, how do I come in from a new direction? How do I figure out how you think about something as my audience? Not just what you know about, but how, not just what you know about it, but how you think about it. And then how do I come in with a big picture idea that helps you get at it in a new way? So framing, when we do it well, makes it possible for us to lead on the story and lead on the message instead of following and fighting on ground that somebody else has set up. So using this knowledge, we avoid some of those traps that we can get into, and we avoid triggering assumptions that people already have. One of my favorite recent examples of this is that Gallup did polling this past November, looking at how people responded to the word Obamacare versus the word Affordable Care Act. So they read people over the phone a line about those healthcare programs. One would use Obamacare, the other used the phrase the Affordable Care Act, which is kind of the official name of the bill. And in November, if you said Obamacare, the support for the policy was at 38%. 38% people would approve. But if you instead used the Affordable Care Act, 45% of people approved. It's the same thing. But one was triggering a whole lot of other assumptions that they had about Obama, about unrelated policies, and about what had been happening with this whole healthcare debate. So maybe 45% is still not great, but it's way better than 38%. And maybe we'll see that go up. I hope so. So when we're looking at frames, and we're going to look at a couple of examples, we're going to look for things in a frame that define the issue. We're going to look in our frame for an explanation of who's responsible. It's a question we ask as Americans a lot. And then we're going to look for what is the solution that's being suggested, in more of Christine's language. What is it you want your audience to do? And that really is the question. And all of these ideas are conveyed through images, through stereotypes, through data, and through anecdotes. And stereotypes in the sense that when you give one example, people blow that out into a generalization. Here's one person in your program. Okay, they think that probably looks like the program. They think of it as an example, a stereotype. So let's use frames that tap into positive beliefs, find ways to start this conversation in good places, so that your work can be seen, your solution can be considered rather than being dismissed, like the Obamacare example. So here's what we in Advocates for a Highest Future have done a lot. We really care about working on poverty issues, on eliminating poverty over time. And so we needed to think about what is the language we use, how are we approaching conversations, especially when we consider that in Ohio right now, we're working with a fully Republican legislature and a fully Republican administration. We don't want to go in and trigger assumptions or make them feel like they have to fight battles with their constituents. So, although many people who work in poverty-related fields are incredibly motivated by what we would call a sympathy frame. It's not just exactly what it looks like. Set up your big picture, whatever your big picture is. Maybe it doesn't quite fit into place for a problem solution. And then the adding faces part is adding your examples. So storytelling is really powerful. People connect with stories, but we want to set them up to be in the right frame of mind once they encounter the stories. And more information about these story themes is actually in your folder. I've included a resource in there from Topos. Topos Partnership is this communications firm down here in Cincinnati, and they have been our Sherpas of framing as we have learned as an organization to do this well. So they have some great resources online. I would highly recommend this teeny tiny little read. It breaks down just a little more info on the stories of place, stories about solutions and the big picture. It's all in there. It's a quick read, and it can really help gel all these ideas together. So highly recommend that for later, and Topos is a great resource for more information on framing. We do this all the time. So I want us to play with two examples. I have one that is not my favorite example, and one that I feel like is a better example of looking specifically at an individual story. So we've talked about framing with the big picture. Now we're going to look at what the stories themselves. How welfare reform working for America?
The issue is unclear for me.
Okay, the issue's unclear. Sure, we're 100 words into the article, and the title says it's about welfare reform. We don't know much more about it than that. Okay. Any other takes on the issue? Yeah.
Well, we were talking, and it appears to be that the issue has changed America. Welfare reform has changed America by leading with a negative story and a negative profile, that it's changed America for the worse.
All right.
It's very subtle.
It is subtle, but it's still soaking into your brain. Great. So, how has welfare changed America? By leading with a negative story, you're suggesting, without saying to your audience, maybe it's changed America for the worse.
I mean, both of the examples are single women with children, so I think that's also kind of subtext is forcing single women with children back into the workforce a positive development.
Okay, is forcing single women with children back into the workforce a positive development? And both of the examples have the same kind of person, single women with children involved. Yeah.
We were looking at also the issue of work ethic being connected to welfare, because the second story is very positive and it includes a comment about her positive work ethic. But the first story is negative, does the same thing. She could also have a very good work ethic and lots of barriers. It's not right. So I think often sometimes there's a message that also can be said is that pull yourself up by the bootstraps type of thing. Welfare reform is working for people who are willing to work and not working for the lazy ones or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a mix of messages about the work ethic of the people involved. Okay.
Yeah, similar to that, the work ethic. I mean, they set these two women up where you feel differently about them. I mean, Michelle Gordon was 30, a poor, single mother, whereas Mary Bradford was just 25 with 3 children. And then to be poor or single.
Okay.
And there's no picture of that.
There's no picture.
Yeah.
No picture.
I want to compliment you greatly for the selection of this story, because whatever you want me to do, whatever call to action you have coming for me, I've already decided I don't want to do it.
You've already decided. Someone mentioned the photo. She has on shoes that she probably doesn't wear to work. She's sitting on concrete steps. There's a pop bottle and a broom in the background.
Yep.
She says, "I'm keeping my head up and I'm surviving." That's the caption. One of my favorite things about this is how much the government is involved in these two women's decisions. So Michelle Gordon, the first story, says the federal government decided parents on welfare should go back to work. But in the case of Mary Bradford, who was in the exact same situation, it says she traded welfare for a job.
Yes.
Good for her.
Where's her picture?
Where is her picture?
Right.
And it's misleading because the overwhelming majority of people on welfare in this country don't look like Michelle.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're triggering stereotypes left and right in this story. Okay, so let's hit the other two questions briefly because we've got it. We understand the framing of this. So who's responsible in these stories?
The individual.
The individual, or maybe the government that forces somebody to do something. If you catch that phrase as you read it. Yeah. Okay, and what's the solution? Do you have a solution?
Have a woman write the story.
Richard Wolff isn't doing it for you? Someone needs to talk to him. Talk about the media as an audience. Someone we've got to realize that we have to do so carefully. So framing. And to be fair, we're assuming some things about the goal of this article. It goes back and forth. It continues for another couple of pages. There's some data. They don't really reach a conclusion in this article. So we're presupposing that Richard Wolff wants to send us one direction. Maybe he does. Maybe he's just revealing his bias. At any rate, we aren't seeing the whole picture here. But from the very beginning, we know where we as readers have been put mentally. So let's try this again with a different example. Turn back in your packet one page. You see a story from a woman named Kathy Coppin, and this comes from Ohiospeaks. Here is a photo of Kathy, which I didn't include in your handout. And we'll look at some of this, and we're going to ask the same questions. What's the issue? Who's responsible? What are the solutions? So, this story from Kathy through Ohiospeaks says, since childhood, I've had a neuromuscular condition which affects all of my muscles. With the support of my parents, family, and friends, and financial assistance from the Ohio Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation, I was able to attend Kent State University and earn a Bachelor of Science degree in biology. After college, I worked for the Cleveland Clinic for 25 years. Through the Ohio Personal Care Assistance Program, I received enough funding to hire attendants so that I could move from my parents' home to my own home in the community. I paid taxes, volunteered for organizations advocating for the needs of persons with disabilities, volunteered on church committees, and have always been a contributing member of society. The final paragraph talks about an additional service that she's accessed as she ages. But I'll leave it at that and have you with your groups ask those same questions. What's the issue? Who's responsible? And what is the solution? There you go.
all of the different supports this person had received. Please accept this in the spirit with which I'm going to say it, okay? I read it and started to calculate in my mind all the different investments that tax dollars had gone into for this one individual. And there are individuals who are having trouble accessing food. And so my question became, I'm happy that these resources were available to people. Is there a problem with how we're distributing resources such that we may be putting so many in one place and not evenly distributing them? And I know there's no magic calculation for how that should be done. But for instance, there is funding for 24-hour care for this person. And in my family, somebody would have had to take 8 of those hours so that the government didn't have to support 24 hours of care, okay? So I think that I was thrilled with what was available to her, but thought, oh my God, could the resources have been more evenly distributed?
Okay, so looking at this, for you there was a calculation, how many services, at what cost, at what length of time? Is there a different way to distribute them than what we're seeing, at least for this, with this person as an example? Is that true for other people, in her situation? They're great questions to ask. Okay, so there's an issue of services available, at what cost, and what do people need? What do people with disabilities need?
Well, the story's written in first person too. That makes a huge difference than third person, I think.
Okay, there's a different feeling to a first-person story versus maybe a third-person story.
Yeah, she's very positive. Like it's almost like she's sensitive to the fact that people could look at someone in her situation as soaking up tax dollars. It's like she goes out of her way to say, I'm still productive, I'm still doing things in society. So your investment in the programs that are helping me is a good thing because I can still do all these things. So it's like she frames herself the way Michelle should have been framed.
Okay.
And the other party.
Okay, so Kathy goes out of her way to state the things that she is involved in to sort of demonstrate community value and what she's been able to do. That's actually my one concern about this story as a framer. Is she playing in that individual responsibility playground a lot by making those statements? On the other hand, she's had a lot of resources that she's been able to take advantage of. And another way of thinking about it is she has been able to live her life in a way that the rest of us live our lives. In her own home, with a job that she held for 25 years. That's not a stereotype that we have of people with disabilities. And so in those statements, there's hopefully something that can connect with your audience. Oh, I volunteer. I'm a part of an organization. I've held my job for a long time. I, got a bachelor's degree. Something like that. It's the relational piece. It's that seeing yourself in the people you're reading stories about. Potentially. But there's a little danger in those statements. So who's responsible in the story?
She's taking along, she's following the steps to get the help that she needs.
Okay, Kathy's taking responsibility to take steps to get the help she needs in order to live her life in the way she wants.
Yeah, but she herself even says she realizes that she's benefited greatly from the government programs. So
Okay.
she doesn't assume all responsibility, but she acknowledges that she's received some exceptional benefits.
Okay, so there's a recognition that the programs themselves have been incredibly helpful for her in being able to accomplish her own life goals. Any other responsibilities in there?
The issue of having health and
the way this is framed, you know, as far as putting a little personal hook, I mean, almost anybody who's reading it would fall into one of those categories, and you might say to yourself that, oh, you know, in this situation, this is something which could be done. This is what I did. The church is in there with the volunteering, so it's just all these issues hit across the wall.
Yeah, so there are angles in here for a lot of different kinds of readers. So it might appeal to a broad audience. Hopefully you find something you can relate to in there. It's a great point. All right, okay, let's grab a couple more comments and then we'll keep going.
This might be unintentional, but I noticed that both stories in a way are about mobility. One is sort of economic mobility, whereas the other one is physical mobility. And how do we as a community or as a society, how do we value those things differently?
Okay. It's an interesting comparison. So maybe it's about mobility, one economic versus physical mobility in a community. Any other comments? One note, let's look at this is Kathy's photo again, and she's in front of some nice green plants. You can see her wheelchair in the background. She's wearing a business jacket. It's a close-up of her, so you don't get to make a lot of assumptions about her surroundings. It doesn't tell a lot of other details that you might approve or disapprove of. Just as a note on visuals, smart move versus what we saw with Michelle George before. Some unfortunate photography. All right, thank you for working through these ideas of these stories with me. And you're right in seeing that even the better framed one, there are ways you can get at those ideas. Framing is difficult to do. This story with Kathy is not 100% perfect, but I think it's a good example of a solution story. So, I have a couple of resources I want to leave you with, and we won't walk through all of them. I'm just going to tell you what you got in front of you because you're going to be writing these LOIs, thinking about how you might put a project together. So, in this packet, on the page ahead of the stories, I already told you about Topos and about that article I've left for you. I have a couple of resources for you on storytelling. I've told you in this packet where the Ohiospeaks website is. You're welcome to go and look at it, see some of the other stories that are up. I have directed you to Topos, their website, and some other framing resources. A couple of articles that they've written that for me are really helpful when I'm thinking about how I'm going to frame my work. And then finally, some data resources. We haven't hit on data a lot, but data is one of those ways that you can help to reinforce your stories and reinforce your big picture idea. So you might start your conversation with, we want to strengthen families and communities. Here's where Ohio is now in terms of this issue. And maybe you have your own data in your program or about your community. But there are a couple of options here if you want to look more at the statewide level or you just need some other ideas about how to set up that big picture. There might be some data in there that helps you with your issue. So those are the data resources there. And then finally on the back we have what we have here, which are questions to help you consider choosing a storyteller. We've sort of circumspectly gotten a few of these questions as we've looked at these two story examples. These are questions to help guide you in thinking about what are the aspects of choosing a storyteller that might affect your project in different ways. So does their story help highlight a broader trend or influence that impacts your issue? What is the action that you want your audience to take? That for me is that paramount question. Does the story help direct the audience towards taking that action, whether it's supporting the program, going and getting a screening, writing a legislator, whatever it is you want them to do. And there are several more questions in there. Is it the third question? Yeah. What elements of the storyteller's life can you tie to the lives of your intended audience? That gets at some of the things that we liked in Kathy's story that help us to connect to other people that help you say, oh yeah,
to the same audience with the same story?
How often can you go back to the same audience with the same story? I guess I would say it depends on your audience. I mean, how many times do you see a commercial? You know, you're supposed to see something multiple times before you even act. When we're trying to get people to sign a letter, you know, you get multiple emails from us. Hopefully, you see it on social media, etc. I'm not exactly sure when people get fed up with that conversation, but especially if you're using it in different forms. If you have a video, they may see the video one time, you give a written piece with a quote or an example or a photo of that person. I feel like you can hit them in multiple ways with the same story, and it's not going to stick with them like, oh, that's exactly like what I saw before, in the way that it will with you because you work with it all the time.
Because there are so many resources going in with written work, sometimes we do, like I'm responsible for fundraising, so I do the kind of success stories for the donors, and hard mail, regular mail. But then, whenever I'm trying to work on e-newsletter or e-story for the same audience and the donors, I always look at my mind, okay, let's do a different story, just because, you know, these people already thought they're looking for it. What's your take on that? Is it okay to send the same story to the hard copy and then email will they say, oh, I already thought that, or e-newsletter usually looks more vibrant, more bright, and then you can plug in other pieces of information with the anchor story. So what do you think about that?
I think you're already getting at it even as you say it. So how do you keep the story fresh if you're doing it in multiple forms? If you send it via mail, can you do it in an e-newsletter or an email? I would say yes, you can and should absolutely repeat it. Hopefully they read your mail. I don't know what your open rates are. I know what my email open rates are, and 14 to 18% is pretty darn good. So what that means is that some people have seen it. A lot of people, if I send it to them another way, it's hitting them for the first time. For others, it reinforces. And so there are small changes you can make that you were kind of mentioning in format and not having it look exactly the same in both venues. Maybe using a slightly different photo or a different set of photos or a slightly different headline. All of those help to feel fresh to people. But that reinforcement is really not a bad thing. You see that in all kinds of messaging. I want to make sure I leave some time
have a
for
couple more
Christine.
questions. We'll still be around afterwards, but go
Yes.
ahead and take two more. Alex and Melanie, if you want.
All right, let's go.
Thanks, Gail. So just looking at your Twitter icon poses the question of how does social media impact the way you frame a story, especially when, in the case of Twitter, you're limited to 140 characters. How do you use what you've got